Good afternoon, everyone. It is another Monday closer to Christmas, but for the Holloway family, it's another Monday farther away from getting the answers they so desperately seek in the disappearance of their daughter, Natalie. With the release of Johan van der Sloot last Friday, Aruba's chief prosecutor says he will close the case by the end of the month unless he finds enough evidence to charge someone with a major crime. Michael Archer is the forensic scientist for Johan van der Sloot's legal team, and TJ Ward is an investigator working with Natalie's father, Dave Holloway. Michael, I'm actually going to start with you. When Johan and the Kalpoe brothers were rearrested, Aruban authorities said they were acting because of new evidence in the case. And unless I missed my guess, there was no new evidence.
That's right, Star. This was much ado about nothing. Hans Maass led us to believe there was incriminating new evidence, and this was going to close the case.
I mean, just to interrupt you, is it that there was no new evidence, or that there was not substantial enough evidence to charge somebody with?
Well, there was no new evidence. It was simply rehashing what they had, reinterpreting some cell phone and telephone conversations that could be interpreted a million different ways. And with their tunnel vision, they took it their way and wanted to celebrate that, and it was outrageous.
So basically, you're talking about looking at the same stuff, just new people looking at it.
I think that's a fair statement.
You know, I'm concerned, obviously, and I'm going to talk to TJ and actually in a little while a member of the Holloway family about not only for your clients, obviously who you all are concerned with, but this reopens a wound for the Holloway family, and it's sort of like geeking everybody else up for something which seems a little bit of PR ploy for me.
You know, Star, it's incredibly unfair to the Holloway family. To lead them to believe that maybe Natalie could be found and maybe this case could be solved. It's just grossly unfair and the wrong thing for Hans Maass to have done.
So now let's move to your client. Not only do you say that there's no evidence against Joran, you say the absence of evidence is very telling.
Right. Sometimes in forensics, the absence of evidence is as remarkable as the presence of evidence.
What would you expect to see? Because I know that you did almost a minute-by-minute walk through the minutes leading up to Natalie's disappearance and the minutes afterwards, and you found something very interesting.
I did. I drove from Carlos and Charlie's, went up toward the lighthouse where Natalie wanted to see the sharks. We turned around in the very parking lot that they turned around in. We went to the fisherman's hut. I got out. I walked the beach. And then we went to the hotel. We went to Natalie's room. All the points of interest we covered. And I reviewed the file from top to bottom, back to front. There's no evidence that a crime was committed. Never mind that my client, Joran van der Sloot, was involved in Natalie's disappearance.
What do you think happened then?
I don't know. There's other explanations, though, than Joran killed Natalie, which seems to be what everyone wants to celebrate and make such a big deal out of. You know, she was intoxicated on the beach that night. That's a given. Did she go for a swim? Did she drown? There's many different explanations that should be considered that I don't think were.
And you also, in addition to going step by step and place by place, you've come to the conclusion that there was not enough time for Johan van der Sloot to have committed any sort of act that would have led to her disappearance.
Right. We're talking about a 17-year-old kid, Star, who, by his own admission and by the videotapes that exist, had a few drinks that night.
He was drunk, come on.
I'm not going to say that, but...
He was drunk, I will.
If Joran was half drunk, somewhat intoxicated at 17, he has a window of 18 minutes to have killed Natalie, eliminated the crime scene, saw to it that every piece of forensic evidence that may have existed in the cars, on his person, on his clothes, disappeared, and then disposed of the body in such a way that the world's greatest forensic sleuths 2.5 years later can't find.
So it's ridiculous. You're saying that it defies logic in addition to just common sense.
That's right.
Fair enough. You know, do you think there's a possibility that the prosecutor could change their mind by the end of the month?
Anything's possible in this case, you know. Based on last month's antics, sure, it's a possibility. We certainly hope it's not the case. There was an appellate court ruling that the media hasn't really covered, which I think is very important. And the appellate court, in addressing the Kalpoe brothers' release, says there's no evidence that a crime was committed. There's no evidence that Natalie died as a result of foul play. Absence that evidence, you can't have suspects. And hopefully Hans Maass takes that appellate court ruling to heart.
That's the prosecutor, just
That's
for
the
my
prosecutor,
audience.
yes.
Now, you saw Joran.
I spoke to Joran, yes. I was with Joran immediately when he was released from jail, and I spoke to him at that point, and I spoke to him shortly thereafter.
How are his spirits?
You know, Joran is hopeful that the end of the month brings closure to this case, so that the cloud does not hang over him. But at the same time, Joran would love to see Natalie Holloway found, because he thinks it would give an explanation to what happened and, you know, eliminate this cloud of suspicion that's going to follow him for the rest of his life.
No matter what happens, let's go ahead and bring TJ Ward into this, private investigator for Dave Holloway. I know, TJ, the last thing you wanted to hear was that this investigation is going to be closed, but in some ways, what occurred over the last 2 weeks has been very, very painful for the Holloway family. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. Thank you for having me on, Star.
Absolutely.
Not to say that I'm not disappointed, but I am disappointed, and I'm not surprised to the fact of what transpires in Aruba. And I think the American people need to know that the course of what they consider an arrest in Aruba is not the same as an arrest in the United States. If you know of evidence or have evidence or a witness or have some information they need to know, they have the right to take you in custody and hold you up to 9 days before they have to take you before a judge. And I'm real surprised, since the Holland authorities have gotten involved with Aruba with this, that transpired again. I'm real disappointed with it, and I thought that they had something to hang their hat on, but obviously they didn't. The mere fact that the boys were last seen with Natalie when they left Carlos and Charlie's does make them a suspect.
Obviously.
And I believe they need to remain as a suspect, and irrespective of what evidence they have or what they don't have, and we don't know exactly what all the government has, because it's not public record to not only the attorneys but to people like me or any other person that's looking into this. I understand that Tim Miller has orchestrated a foundation to bring a boat in.
That's the Echo Search people. We've talked about them many times here on this show. Let me just let our audience know, TJ, they are some of the best when it comes for searching for missing people, and they obviously have the resources to bring to bear. And I know that they have been of great assistance in Natalie's investigation. I understand there's a new thing that is hopefully going to happen. Can you fill us in on that with this particular kind of boat, this vessel that can search the ocean floor?
I would say that I believe that I don't believe the boys killed her from the course of our investigation. I don't believe that happened. I think something happened to her, and I think a third party, whether it's Paulus Vandersloot, from some evidence that we have, may be involved in taking Natalie's body off the island or having somebody take the body off the island. And this has just surprised me that they brought all three of the boys back in, but they didn't bring Paulus Vandersloot back into the picture, who has been arrested twice since the case originated.
So you think and wait one second, I want to be clear on what I heard you say, TJ. You actually think that Natalie may not have been killed in the traditional sense as we might think, but that she died as a result of whatever occurred that night, and in an effort to cover up her death, she was disposed of. That's what you think happened?
I think that I think something happened, and I've said that all along. I think that Natalie either stopped breathing, had a heart attack, fell and hit her head, but something happened, and somebody else is involved with the boys contacting somebody else, and the body was taken or disposed off the island, from information that I have, that Natalie's body was taken off the island by somebody, not by the boys. But I'm real surprised, because some of the information that I have leads to Paulus Vandersloot having knowledge to this occurring.
Well, you know, TJ, I want you to hold on a minute, because I know that the Holloway family has just put up with more than any family should ever have to. And so in the last few minutes, I do want to be joined on the phone by Paul Reynolds, who's best brother, Natalie's uncle. Paul, I know that you have spoken to your family about this. What are the family's plans now that the Aruban prosecutor has announced that he is probably going to close the case at the end of the month.
Well, Star, first I need to tell you that we are literally shocked that these suspects have been released.
Yes, sir.
We are aware, and everyone knows, that these suspects have lied from the beginning. They have accused each other of murder. They have led authorities on wild goose chase after another to cover up their crimes. We believe the prosecutor must have had some reason to bring this case back into the light. And we have one judge that says there's reason to hold them, and then another judge says there's not a reason to hold them 16 days later.
I know, but Paul, as you listen to this, though, you know, you have heard investigators with your family, investigators with the defendants' families, or I should say the suspects' family, since they've never been charged, and looking at the evidence dispassionately, just looking at the evidence, it doesn't seem that there's enough to charge anyone with anything significant. Now, I know that there has always been some question as to what their veracity was from the beginning. There's no question that there was some finger pointing, no question that, you know, in this case, in this country, I might be looking at obstruction of justice. But, Paul, if in fact you can't bring the major charge, would your family still want one of those sort of minor charges to be brought?
Well, we want all charges to be brought, and we don't consider obstruction of justice or interfering with an investigation a minor charge. We consider that to be very serious.
But in our country, it is, you know, and that's a big difference. Because we were looking at some of the law, Paul, and, you know, lying, if you will, what we might call obstruction, is used to sort of enhance charges when you're in Aruba. It's not the charge that they bring you in on. And then I was just looking at some information, and according to the prosecutor's office, they said that the immediate family did not want these men charged with minor charges. They wanted some closure to know what happened to their child.
Well, I think we have to look at what's available. It's clear they were lying. It's clear they interfered with this investigation. And even today, the three suspects don't agree on what happened. Certainly, this leads us to believe that they have a high level of responsibility, and they should be pursued. You know, the fact that these judges are making these decisions individually with secret information causes us a great deal of concern. You know, there was the night of the original search warrant, the search was supposed to be the entire property. It's my understanding that one of the judges was waiting at the home of the Vandersloots and interfered in the investigation by changing the criteria and only allowing them to search Huron's small apartment and not the main house of which Huron had obviously been in earlier that day, nor the property.
Well, you know what, Paul, I can't let just that hang here, because it's not fair to just put out bare-bone allegations. That's not fair, and I know that, Michael, you definitely disagree with this.
Yeah, I do disagree with it, and I myself searched the property last week, and I have photographs documenting where the authorities searched. So to say that the authorities simply searched Johan's room is completely untrue. That's a misstatement.
And see, this is the thing that we have encountered, Paul, Michael, TJ, that we over here in this country have been getting sort of information from several different sources. I know one thing that everybody who is having this discussion, the four of us, can agree on, is that the investigators from day one did not do the job that would do justice for Natalie, do justice for the people who are suspected, do justice for the families. I don't think that they did their job. And if that's the one thing I think everybody can agree on, that this investigation was screwed from the beginning.
I agree with you, Star. 2.5 years later, my client suffers under this cloud of suspicion, which will never go away.
And Natalie's family suffers under the cloud
Absolutely.
of not having their baby with them. I want to thank Michael Archer, TJ Ward, and Paul Reynolds for their contribution to this discussion. When we come back, new developments in the case of Stacey Peterson, including a voicemail message she left for her father. And later, in the aftermath of the Omaha mall shootings, we'll hear from the father of a school shooter about the fallout on their family from his son's actions. So please stay right there.